Hi folks, welcome to Crisco's Corner. Are you tired of the same old blah, 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 blah from the media? Do you like unfiltered commentary? Would you like to go back to the days when our rights meant something? Well, you've come to the right place, Crisco's Corner. The fight to get back the ideals of our founders will be long and hard. Please support the channel by subscribing. And as always, thank you for your support. Hi folks, welcome back to Crisco's Corner. You probably know by now, but if you haven't, Rush Limbaugh, conservative talk radio pioneer, dead at 70. Limbaugh's death following stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis announced by family. Yeah, I was, when I heard that, I just sighed and I was sad. And as time went on, I thought more about Rush. He was very controversial. Some people say I am here locally. I used to be a local councilman in the early 2000s. And some people say I was Trump before Trump. I just say things sometimes and it just comes out, and that's the way it is. And Rush did that for a long time. He said some dumb things. I'm not going to be wrong. But one thing I felt really bad about is the fact that this guy was a pioneer. He was an icon, an American icon, not just a radio icon. And I don't think people understand back in the mid-late 80s, radio, talk shows, radio was dying out, the talk show part, just dying. It was almost dead. And I guess they changed the law concerning you have to give equal time to an opposing view or some nonsense for free. And that law was changed, and it opened the floodgates. And Rush, I don't think he was a shock jock in the Howard Stern type mode, but he was incredibly opinionated and believed strongly about what he believed in. And I want to say this to all those people that put really shitty things on Twitter. I hope you died a painful and horrible death, and I feel sorry for the people in hell and other such bullshit. You know what? This is what the left does. This is why I'm pushing harder and harder and harder from a conservative viewpoint. Because the fact of the matter is, when something like this happens, and somebody that's very controversial, very hot and cold like me, you really like me or you really don't. When a person dies and one side of the ideological spectrum says some nasty and horrible things, and the other side wishes condolences and they feel bad, but even somebody on the left that dies, the exception of the rule is conservative people doing stupid shit like that and being nasty and just vulgar and vile. But that's the standard rule now on the left. On the progressives and the leftists, the standard rule is we hate your guts. And if you die, we're glad. Whereas that stupidity on the right is very much the exception. Hardly ever. I'm not saying it never happens, but extremely rarely. And that should open up the people that hear this or are in the middle, so to speak, of the ideological war that's going on right now in culture and in politics, that maybe the people that care more about people really are the conservatives. And the ones that care about ideology and don't give a good damn about people are the progressives. But I wanted to get that off my chest before we continued. Let's read on. Rush Limbaugh, the monumentally influential media icon who transformed talk radio and politics in his decades behind the microphone, helping shape the modern-day Republican Party, died Wednesday morning at the age of 70 after a battle with lung cancer, his family announced. His wife did, I guess, on his show. Limbaugh's wife, Catherine, made the announcement on his radio show. Losing a loved one is terribly difficult. Even more so when that loved one is larger than life, she said. Rush will forever be the greatest of all time. The radio icon learned he had stage 4 lung cancer in January 2020 and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by then President Trump at the State of the Union address days later. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi, being the class act that she is, just sat there. Well, everybody stood and clapped, of course. Whether you like the guy or not, you had to respect him. Over 30 years, 3 hours a day, talking what you strongly believed in, and that was your family, your country, the American way of life, I guess, the American Constitution, and how unique and how special this country is. And he was a sworn arch enemy of people that wanted to tear this country down. We're not perfect, but we're not evil either. We are a huge positive force in the world, and he believed that strongly, as do I. And we're watching now. When I say mainstream politicians, now we're talking about the President of the United States, of all people. It's incredible to me how this is seeped into everything. And now, in order not to be destroyed by the progressives and the leftists, you have to talk their talk. As president, Rush was against anything that was anti-American. Anything that was anti-American. It's like something you love deeply. They're not perfect people. Your wife, your husband, when your children, a close friend, they're not perfect. But they're way better than they are flawed. And that's how we saw America. The radio icon learned he had stage 4 cancer June 2020. Yeah, we went through that. Rush Limbaugh, thank you for decades of tireless devotion to our country, President Trump said during the address. He told Fox News on Wednesday, the first interview, by the way, in a long time from President Trump. And I think they introduced him. Harris Faulkner introduced him as former President 45, I think she said. So that was kind of cool. On Wednesday afternoon, Trump said, there aren't too many legends around. He is a legend. It is not clear exactly where Limbaugh died. He frequently broadcast his show from his home studio in Palm Beach, Florida. He actually fell in love with Florida a few years back. Limbaugh is considered to be one of the most influential media figures in American history and has played a consequential role in conservative politics since the Rush Limbaugh Show began in 1988. Perched behind his golden EBI, which stands for Excellence in Broadcasting microphone, Limbaugh spent over 3 decades as arguably both the most beloved and polarizing person in American media. All true. The program that began 33 years ago on national syndication, only 56 radio stations, grew to be the most listened to radio show in the United States, airing on more than 600 stations, according to the show's website. Up to 27 million people tune in on a weekly basis, and Limbaugh was lovingly referred to his passionate fan base as ditto heads, as they would often say ditto when agreeing with the iconic radio host. In his final radio broadcast of 2020, Limbaugh thanked his listeners and supporters, revealing at the time that he had outlived his prognosis. I wasn't expected to be alive today, he said. I wasn't expected to make it till October, and then November, and then December, and yet here I am, and today, got some problems, but I'm feeling pretty good today. Limbaugh helped boost Trump's influence prior to the 2016 election simply by taking him seriously as a candidate when other established conservatives didn't want the former reality television star anywhere near the Republican Party. Many of Limbaugh's listeners eventually became Trump supporters, and the radio legend continued to defend Trump through his presidency despite occasional disagreements. In the heat of the 2020 presidential election, Limbaugh hosted Trump on October for what was an unprecedented 2-hour radio rally, during which the president was virtually given control of the coveted golden microphone to answer questions from the host and his listeners. Limbaugh, born in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, on January 12, 1951, began his radio career in 1967 as a helper when he was 16 years old. He eventually graduated to disc jockey and worked as a small radio station roughly 100 miles south of St. Louis while attending high school. I was totally consumed, Limbaugh told the New York Times in 1990. Knowing that his idol was a Chicago radio host named Larry Alujak. By 1991, Limbaugh was morning radio host in Pittsburgh, where he was oddly told to cover a certain amount of farm news because the area was surrounded by many agricultural communities. In 2007, he explained to his listeners how the young radio host managed to keep listeners despite the bizarre requirement. Last thing that the audience of my show cares about is farm news. If farm news came on, bam, I pushed the button to go somewhere else. So we had to figure out, okay, how do we do this and protect the license? So I turned the farm news every day into a funny bit with farm sound effects and the roosters crowing and so forth. And I'd make fun of the stockyard feed prices or whatever it was. So they would say, we're doing barn news, agriculture news. That was kind of things like that Limbaugh told listeners. The tidbit offered a glimpse in Limbaugh's early days. He was a master of keeping audiences engaged from a young age. Limbaugh said he realized America was the greatest country ever when taking trips to Europe and Asia in his late 20s and 30s, an experience that helped him shape his political views. I'm aware the United States is young compared to countries in Europe and Asia that have been around for hundreds of years. They're 1,000-year-old civilizations, he told listeners in 2013. So I go to Europe and say, hey, wait a minute. Why is this bedroom so damn old-fashioned and doesn't work? What the hell is this? Why do they call this a toilet? So I started asking myself, how is that we went around 200 years, are light years ahead of people that have been alive 1,000? So I started thinking it was a matter of genuine curiosity to me and not from a braggadocious standpoint. Limbaugh continued to trip down memory lane. I was literally interested in how that happened. And I started to think about all the other things that we led the world in: manufacturing, technology, innovation, invention, creation. And it all led back to the liberty and freedom and the pursuit of happiness and dreams, coming true and working hard for whatever you want, being able to do what you love, not just what you dream about. From that point forward, Limbaugh believed the American exceptionalism shouldn't be frowned upon, and his conservative views became more prominent. We stood for the concepts in our Declaration of Independence: right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We stood for that. We were the beacon for it, and this is the day. To this day, this is why the oppressed of the world still seek to come to this country, he said. Limbaugh also credited National Review founder William F. Buckley Jr. for teaching him how to articulate conservative views. He single-handedly is responsible for my learning to form and frame my beliefs and express them verbally in a concise and understandable way, Limbaugh once said. In 1987, the Federal Communications Commission repealed the Fairness Doctrine, a policy that had been in place since 1949, and mandated that both sides of controversial political issues receive equal time in radio programs. The decision by the FCC paved the way for Limbaugh to broadcast his conservative views without fear of being punished by the government, quickly leading to a now prominent talk radio format that he pioneered. The vast majority of podcasts like mine that are very much bigger than mine and a lot more successful, podcasting in general, all of that would not be around if it was not for Rush Limbaugh. Talk radio, good and bad, both, just like people, would not be around if it wasn't for Rush Limbaugh. After local radio gigs in Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Sacramento, Limbaugh landed at WABC in New York shortly after the Fairness Doctrine was repealed. It was there that he changed talk radio forever when the Rush Limbaugh Show became a cultural phenomenon for both the message and the way it was delivered. Unlike most radio talkers who affect a casual, intimate style, Limbaugh sounds like he's on a soapbox. He is intoxicated by words, especially those flowing from his own lips. His vocabulary is extensive. His diction tends to be grandiosely formal, though overblown to the point of self-parody. His nervous energy plays out through hands that never stop moving. They rattle the paper, slam the desk, punch the console, whap, whap, whump. Those muted percussion is often heard on the air, a rhythmic accompaniment to Limbaugh's voice, author Louis Grossberger wrote in the New York Times in 1990. At one point, after early struggles to find success in the radio business, Limbaugh temporarily left the industry and worked for the Kansas City Royals team. Luckily for conservatives and diddleheads, he eventually returned to radio. Thanks for all you're doing to promote Republican and conservative principles. Now that I've learned from active politics, I don't mind as you have become the number one voice for conservatives in our country, President Ronald Reagan once wrote in a letter to Limbaugh that was published by National Review in 2003. I know the liberals call you the most dangerous man in America. I would take that as a compliment. Of course, liberals back then are the progressives and leftists now. But don't worry about it. They used to say the same thing about me. Keep up the good work. America needs to hear the way things ought to be, Reagan continued. Limbaugh was eventually enshrined in the Radio Hall of Fame and the National Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame. He was five-time winner of the National Association of Broadcasters Marconi Award for excellence in syndicated and network broadcasting. By weird coincidence, about 3 blocks from here, right in Binghamton, New York, and upstate New York, there's a Marconi radio tower that still stands by the old railroad station, believe it or not. Excellence in syndicated and network broadcasting, a #1 New York Times bestselling author. It was named one of the Barbara Walters 10 most fascinating people in 2008 and one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world in 2009. When Limbaugh made his career on radio, his speech he delivered at the Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC, in 2009 is widely considered to be one of the most important moments of his career. An explanation of who conservatives are that caused crowd to erupt in USA, USA. We love people. We look out over the United States of America when we are there anywhere. When we see a group of people such as this or anywhere, we see Americans. We see human beings. We don't see groups. We don't see victims. We don't see people we want to exploit. What we see is potential. We do not look across the country and see the average American, the person that makes the country work. We do not see the person that with contempt. We don't think that person doesn't have what it takes. But we believe that person can be the best he or she wants to be if certain things are just removed from their path, like erroneous taxes, regulations, and too much government. Limbaugh told the crowd, we want every American to be the best he or she chooses to be. We recognize that we are individuals. We love and revere our founding documents, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, he continued. But believe that the preamble of the Constitution contains an inarguable truth, that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's all true, and those are things I strongly believe in. Maybe that's why when he died, I took it a lot harder than I thought I would. In 2001, Limbaugh was diagnosed with autoimmune inner ear disease that drastically affected his hearing. In 2003, Limbaugh checked himself in a treatment facility after becoming addicted to pain medication that he was prescribed following back surgery. Also in 2003, Limbaugh resigned from a brief role as ESPN's Sunday NFL Countdown after making controversial comments about then Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb, who the broadcast legend said was overrated by media members who want to see a black quarterback thrive. Limbaugh is survived by his wife. He was married 4 times. That's his 4th wife. Icons and American icons aren't necessarily saints. And I've been sitting here the last few hours just thinking about Rush, and I didn't agree with everything he said. I would say probably 75 to 80% of it. Not all of it. He said some dumb shit before, and that's we all do. I have. I don't have an audience of 30 million people, but, people are people. We all have our flaws and our strength as well. But Rush just had this fire in him that America was the greatest and the most powerful and accepted and loving and kind and generous and wealthiest and the most powerful country that ever lived, that we are the best nation that ever existed in the history of the world without exception. And he believed that with every inch of his soul, even though sometimes when he expressed that, it was controversial. But somebody with that kind of passion for over 30 years can talk 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for over 30 years, tells you that he gives a shit. And he cared about the country, and even more than that, he loved the country. And he would do anything in his power and his influence to make sure anyone that tried to tear down the United States was put in their place for good. And you have to admire that and respect that, even if you don't like him. So rest in peace, Rush Limbaugh. You paved the way for many tens of thousands. And it was funny, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was going to start this YouTube channel / podcast. And my confidence was a little bit down, so I didn't. So I started about 4 or 5 months ago, and I'm being badly shadow banned here on YouTube. It's disgusting what they're doing to me. But I'm still not going to give up. And I thought about, what would Rush do? Rush would just keep on pounding and keep on slugging. And I thank you for that, Rush. And thanks for all of your decades of sticking up and protecting America and Americans. We will be irreplaceable. Absolutely irreplaceable. But hopefully we can play the old recordings, and there's thousands of them, in bits and pieces of your broadcast over the years. You have influenced so many in talk radio on the conservative side. You definitely changed politics in America, and I think for the better. So rest in peace. And now you're looking down on us. Try to give us some guidance, because we're lost right now, and we're having a hard time. And this is really a time we could use Rush Limbaugh. So for those of you out there that are getting discouraged, that are conservatives, that maybe the fight is over, it's not. Rush did it for 35 years, and he won in the end, because the good guys in the end always win. Until next time, folks, goodbye and good luck.